I don't think everybody wants to be a leader, and I don't think everybody is a leader all the time, but everybody can be accountable or not accountable.
Eventually, you're going to have to pay the price. It's paying the price in relationships. It's paying the price in your body. It's paying the price of, I did not do enough of the mental that had nothing to do with physical.
To me, the simplest definition of accountability is doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. If for some reason you are not able to fulfill that commitment, is you own it, as opposed to making 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 excuses.
Before we jump into this episode, I'd love to invite you to be a part of the community where you can listen to more content to help you be a smarter, stronger, and better equipped, successful leader. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button. I would love and appreciate your support. It's amazing to me to watch the community grow and read all of your comments each and every week. I can't wait to go on the journey with you. Thank you so much, and it means the world to me. Welcome to the Impact Driven Leader Podcast with your host, me, Tyler Dickerhoof. Today, I'm joined by Christopher Wirth. I may refer to him as Chris. He gave me the okay. I feel like we're brothers because we're both bald. But man, I'm excited for Chris to be here. He is a professional speaker, author, coach, podcaster. He's the founder and president of No Quit Living. If you're watching on video, you see the no quit across his forehead and the Positivity Tribe. Chris works with sports teams, individuals, schools, and corporations to help them become more successful, productive, efficient, and effective while maintaining their positive mental advantage. He's also the father of 3 as well. Chris, thanks for being here, man.
I appreciate it. I'm going to bring you everywhere. If you could just repeat exactly word for word how you did.
Just do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, so whenever he goes somewhere, I'll be like, yeah, it's me plus one. I have a guy who just does all my intros.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just kind of like the body double, right? Just one bald guy for another. It's all good. Man, it's great to have you here. And, I just, No Quit Living, like, where did that come from? Give me some background. Give me some meat to that.
So it's very funny, simple story that has just turned into something that is obviously who I am, what I am. But many years ago, I don't anymore. I think I had subscribed to maybe 5 or 6 or 7 of those daily email quotes of the day, all different facets. Some are sports, professional, history. Just, I love quotes. I've always enjoyed quotes. And I came across the quote, "It's always too early to quit" by Dr. Vincent Peale. And I don't know if I was in a specific place in my life where it just hit me. And I just started writing it down. I started typing it up. I think I put it in one of my offices. And then I think 6 cars ago, I went and got the vanity plate, "No Quit." And people were like, "That's cool. What does it mean?" This was before No Quit Living was established. I just love the whole idea of not quitting. I'm a big sports guy. I love Michael Jordan and Chicago Bulls, which is why our colors are all red, black, and white. And fast forward, I was beginning to do some speaking, some coaching, and was going to establish a company. And I said, you know what? I said, No Quit Living is going to be the name. And everybody always asks, where did it come from? And I always say it came down to a quote of the day and Dr. Vincent Peale. And it's something that just resonates. And initially, I didn't know where the podcast, where the books, where the speaking was going to go per se, but I just think in today's day and age, the whole idea of not quitting and not giving up has so many different ways that it can be, whether it's in a school, whether it's with adults, with sports teams, with businesses, or just traditional people that work a 9-to-5 job. We all have those obstacles and challenges every day, and we always have that choice. Are we going to give up? Are we going to, just give half effort today, or are we going to go all in and give our best effort? And it's kind of become who I am and what I do. But the really cool part is that it's just something that really resonates with so many people from, like I said, all walks of life.
So there's got to be a tremendous amount of accountability, because if you wear it, you drive with it. And, whether it's your kids, whether it's, peer to whatever else, kind of like, dude, You said no quit. Like, are you holding your end of the bar? Like, tell me about that accountability and how that is as much part of the no quit living brand.
You and I have a connection to John C. Maxwell, who I had the privilege of meeting and going through a certification program. And I know obviously you're a fan of his, and you've gone through probably like a MBA, PhD yourself. But John has a famous quote where everything rises and falls with leadership. And in no way, shape, or form would I ever say that John is wrong, because he's literally been quoted as the world's, if not one of the leading expert when it comes to leadership. But I have a quote that I kind of stole and tweaked and changed from John, which is everything rises and falls with accountability. And I don't mean it to knock John, but I don't believe everybody is a leader. Now, I want to be very clear. I believe everybody can be a leader, and you do not need a title. Robin Sharma wrote a fantastic book. You don't need a title to be a leader, which I agree. But I don't think everybody wants to be a leader, and I don't think everybody is a leader all the time. But everybody can be accountable or not accountable every single day, regardless if you are in middle school, high school, college, a 75-year-old person or not. And I really and truly believe that everything rises and falls with accountability. First and foremost, being accountable to yourself, because before you can be accountable to a team, a company, a spouse, a significant other, child, parent, you have to be accountable to yourself. And David Goggins obviously is well known for that quote unquote self accountability mirror, which I think so many people have spoken about and used, and I use it in a bunch of my speaking coaching as well, because I might be able to fib to you and say, yeah, Tyler, I did all my sales calls today, and I really crushed it in the gym. Maybe I did or maybe I didn't, but I can kind of maybe fool you or convince you that I did. But when I'm brushing my teeth at night or in the morning, you can't look in the mirror knowing that you didn't give your best effort and look in the mirror and say, I gave my best effort today, because you know when you do and you know when you don't. And I think everything rises and falls with accountability. And for me, when I look at the most successful people from all walks of life, regardless of their walk, to me, the most successful ones are the ones that take their accountability to the next level. And what I always say is it's doing those things that you know you need to do and have to do, especially on those days when you don't feel like it and you don't want to.
You shared a lot of things that we're going to have the opportunity to dig into, take some definite tangents here. So I appreciate that. Like my brain is spinning with thoughts and ideas, but I want to come back to this is why do you think accountability is so imperative? Like whether it's our generation, whether it's our kids, whether like give me a little bit deeper nugget why you think accountability. Is it self-accountability? Is it accountability to others? Is it collectively both? Is it one or the other? Like, let's digest that a little bit.
I think it's self accountability. I think it's accountability to someone else, whether that's a parent, a spouse, a friend, but then also collective accountability. Obviously, as you mentioned in the introduction, I do a lot of work with companies and also college sports teams. And just looking at the sports team's perspective, I'm working with a college baseball team right now. And obviously, there are individual players on the team, but there are 9 players on the field at any given point on the defensive end. And if you're only accountable to yourself, let's say, right, you're doing a great job, but you're not accountable to the other 8 guys in the field, you might have a good inning, you might not. It might not mean anything because maybe the ball doesn't even get hit to you. But if you're a second baseman or a shortstop, and whether you're involved with a double play or a cutoff from the outfield, if you're not doing your job past just individually, but now the collective team job of I'm now the cutoff man, or I'm the guy calling out. Do we hold, the runner at third? Do we go to the play at the plate? And it's an example of I think you can take it into all aspects of life, in business, in companies. Yes, you have one job that you do, let's say, but you're also part of the entire sales team, or you're part of the entire marketing team. So I think the most successful people, teams, companies, corporations, families are the ones that I think sit on both sides of the fence. It's that individual accountability, but it's also that collective accountability. But I got asked on a podcast a couple months ago, and I used to ask this question on every single one of my podcast episodes. But to me, the simplest definition of accountability is doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And then the other perspective to that, I guess the subcategory would be, if for some reason you are not able to fulfill that commitment, is you own it, as opposed to making two, three, four, five, six excuses, right? It's, if I told you we were going to do something at a certain time and I don't commit or I don't follow through with that, it's not jumping on saying, hey, my dog ate the homework and then there was traffic, and then it's just coming up and owning it and saying, look, Tyler, I told you that we were going out to dinner at 6 o'clock and I was 15 minutes late. That's on me. I apologize. And that's it. There's no I apologize, but. It's just sitting there owning it. And I think following up is the number one skill this generation, the next generation all needs, is just follow up, do what you say you're going to do. And if for some reason you don't have an excuse, just own it right then and there. And I think that epitomizes accountability.
I want to go back to what you said about leadership. One thing I've learned about John Maxwell, is if he has an idea and you make it better, he applauds you and says, yes, great. And so I don't think he'd take offense to this, is that everything rises and falls on accountability. The question I would say is, what is different from accountability to self-leadership? If you're self-accountable, is that leading yourself? And so coming back to you, say, I don't think everyone's a leader, but it's like, wait, should everyone have accountability and be held accountable? What is leadership in this discussion of accountability and leadership? Like, all right, kind of give me a little bit more, Chris.
So I hope we can send this to John. Not that he doesn't have 7 billion things to do and probably meetings with world leaders and billionaires, but I'd love to get his 2 cents on this, because I think the way you defined it, self-leadership, I think when you define it that way, I think accountability and self-leadership can almost be interchangeable, because you lead yourself. But in some ways, I don't know if everybody has a leadership component after the self-leadership part. Meaning, if I'm leading myself, that's very different than I'm a leader for you. So if you and I are on the same team or company, maybe I'm not a leader for you per se, but I'm leading myself in the sense of, I have a meeting at 9, I have a meeting at 11, and I have to send in these reports by 12. I'm doing a good job leading, self-leading, but maybe I'm not a leader for you and your team. But with accountability, I think regardless if you are working a job or if you're a single parent or college student, you're accountable first and foremost to yourself first. Whether that's getting out of bed, going to your classes, whether it's fulfilling your assignments. We can obviously go down the road, but I think with the way you worded it's really important, because I think self-leadership and accountability are interchangeable. I think where the differs a little bit, and jokingly, I'd love to get John's 2 cents on this, because obviously, he knows, he probably forgets on a daily basis more than I've ever known about leadership. But I think when you are a leader of others, and I always talk about that could be a leader of 2 people, right? You could be a sales manager and there's maybe 2 people underneath you. So it's not a huge sales unit of, 5,000 people, but everybody has the potential to be a leader, depending upon if they're in that situation where they work with others. But I think to be a traditional leader versus a self-leader, you have to have the ability to be working with or collaborating with at least one other, if that makes sense.
I think there's some nuances there to it, right? And we can continue through it, but I think the essence of it is that self-leadership and accountability are really, kind of one and the same. And I would contend is, as you describe the accountability on a team, the person that is the most willing, vulnerable, authentic with their own accountability and others, they rise to be in more of a leadership role. And it goes along in hand. And I think the more that you do it, the more that people look to you and say, hey, Chris, all right, I appreciate you holding yourself accountable and us collectively accountable to what we're trying to aspire to, that ultimately leads to influence, which is leadership. And I think it's, to me, to divide them, I don't know if we can, because I think there's so important that we have accountability as a part of it. And I want to go back to this idea of, how is no quit tied into that level of accountability when we're talking about this, whether it's on the baseball field or self-leadership? How does that no quit really tie into transitioning into leadership?
It's not black or white always when it comes to quitting, right? So, for example, people have given the analogy, well, if you're running a business and you run into the ground and you go bankrupt and your family leaves you and like you go through, I'm like, yeah, okay, do you never quit? And to me, the definition of quitting is giving up when things get hard versus continually fighting. It doesn't mean you're perfect all the time. It doesn't mean you don't ever lose or fail. But for me, when it comes to not quitting, is even if you lose, it's the definition of success, which is unbelievably famous by John Wooden, and I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but it's the satisfaction knowing that you gave your absolute best effort. And when you look at the most successful people, to me, I don't ever define them as perfection. I don't ever define them as they never lost a game, lost a deal. There's not a single person who, ever got upset with them for any. It's those people that even if and when they lost, they kept going. The Tom Brady's when he tore his knee and he came back to become the world champion many times. It's Michael Jordan when he lost many playoff series early on. Yes, he was 6-0 in NBA finals, but he was not undefeated in NBA playoffs. He never once had an NBA season where he was 82-0. And when it comes to accountability, the series, The Last Dance with Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, a lot of his teammates said that he was very difficult to play with. A lot of his teammates said that they were not best friends with him. But the one huge takeaway that I took from that was when it comes to accountability, Michael Jordan was beyond adamant saying, I never expected or I never wanted anything from any of my teammates that I wasn't willing to do myself. And at the end of the day, he was not a good leader by some of his team's definition. And obviously, that's their own opinion. But it'd be very difficult to say that he wasn't a champion. And it would be very difficult to say that he was not unbelievably accountable, not only to himself, but to his team. But he was not a great leader. And I would love to, if we could, like the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire television show, if we could phone in John Maxwell, I'd love to get his 2 cents on that, because I think he would agree that companies and teams and people can be successful in life without always being a great leader. But if you can marry a great leader with success, I think you can take it to a whole new level.
You bring up a lot of different threads and thoughts there. And one I want to hang on to is this idea of, do you never quit? And I think whether it's people say that all successful people just don't quit, they keep going, right? One of the things I've learned there, and coming from growing up on a farm, and like there was never a quit. You just couldn't. Like it just didn't happen. It wasn't a reality. And you can tie that into sports. You can tie it into, military service, whatever else, like Navy SEALs. They just don't quit, right? But I also know that this, from talking to some of those people and analyzing myself, the smartest are the ones that understand when to quit. Because there's an element to where I can be just so hell-bent, I will not quit, that I don't help myself, I don't serve others, I make it actually worse. And I think that's something that maturity, and I think if you bring back to Jordan and Brady and how they got better through elements of their career, is they started to understand the level of effort and accountability, why that mattered and how it mattered. It became their legacy, the legacy of how do we remember Jordan? child of born in late 70s of the 80s. I mean, Jordan's the GOAT, period. Tom Brady's the GOAT, period. And why did they? To me, it's as much how they evolved through their career and almost afterwards. It's why I think Tiger Woods is evolving to be great because of what he's recognizing and spending the time. I was watching the Masters, and it was just recently as we're recording this, and he walks over and shakes Vern Lundquist's hand. And the commentator's like, dude's always so dialed in. He's never, ever, ever, ever done that. But what I saw is there's a guy that finally gets it. What is my place? What am I here to do? How am I leading this sport where it's not all about me, but it's about the game and about how do I serve people in it? And I think that's the legacy that we start to see evolve from people that are maybe so intense that they drive people away, that then they realize that's not helping me or others. I need to change my actions to actually serve and lead people.
Listening to you talk about Tiger and to your point, the Masters, I couldn't agree more. The one thing that stood out to me, I'm also a big tennis fan, and my two favorite players of all time are Rafael Nadal and Andre Agassi. And when you look at the GOAT, it used to be Federer for tennis. Now people say it was then Nadal when he was ahead, I think, of by 3 majors over both of them. And now that Novak Djokovic has taken over as the number one, the one thing that I go back to when it comes to Rafael Nadal is he only has one level. It's 100% all the time. And look at what's happened over the last 5 years. He's been injured a lot because of the wear and tear. And I think going back to the no quitting perspective is, I think if you're playing a tennis match and you're down 2 games to love in the first set and you just say, oh, it's this is going to be hard, you just say I'm not playing and you walk off the court. I think that is quitting in some ways, giving up when you find a little bit of pushback and it gets hard. But then the other perspective is those times when Nadal's been hurt during matches and you can see it in his face and it's the first set and he goes on to play, in the majors, it's 3 out of 5 sets. He goes on to play another 4 sets and ultimately he's now out for 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. So to me, that would not be a definition of quitting. That would be something that, like you had referenced before, when are those times that and I don't look at it as quitting. I look at it more along the lines of pivoting and reflecting and saying, okay, yes, I physically could make it through this match, but then there's also a very significant chance that I'm now going to miss the next 2 majors and maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tournaments. So it goes back to Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods was notorious during his amazing run of just being insane with his workouts, both on the golf course, off the golf course. He went for a period where he was working out with Navy SEALs and doing all these insane things and then lifting. And he's had significant amounts of knee injuries and back injuries. So the challenge then is, okay, is it giving up if you say, look, I physically could make it through the next 2 days of this tournament, but then I'm going to then not be able to play for another 6 months? That to me is not giving up. That to me is not quitting. That is making a assessment and saying, right now, this is not the best thing for the rest of my career. And when he was 21 years old, that's a different story. You can battle through those things. But when you're in your 30s and 40s, especially with golf, you want to make those adjustments and say, yes, I could physically, mentally, I could, but I'm going to stop here so I can then play a week from tomorrow, or I can play 2 weeks at the Masters as opposed to missing all the majors this year.
There's a piece here, and what we're talking about is a bit of self-awareness. And that self-awareness comes, and I think that either comes through experience. I recently listened to a podcast. JJ Redick was talking about when he moved to LA, he's playing for the Clippers, and he goes and talks to Steve Nash. And Steve Nash was several years older. And he's like, Steve, how do you stay what you're doing? He goes, you got to do less. He's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, no, you have to be more effective, but with less, because your body and that wear and tear and that self-awareness, it's not that you're not going to quit. You're going to do the work and it's going to be very, very worthwhile, but you have to manage because of life. And I think that self-awareness, that pivoting, that understanding, I'm going to be accountable, but I'm also knowing when to shut it down, because that part of self-awareness in professional life, and I think we see it so much, and now we're in the day and age of mental health, mental awareness, and, coming from the past, maybe in the 90s, early 2000s, you just put your head down and work. And if you work yourself to, an absolute the bone and your just life is frazzled, well, that's what we expect. And yet what we find out and have found out, that doesn't serve anyone. And so, here I see this juxtaposition. Chris is saying, no quit, right? But then we're like, oh, okay, we got to have a lot of accountability. And we're talking a little bit about self-leadership. And now we're talking about, self-awareness. Put all those together in a pie for me. How does that make sense in your mind?
If I could pause that question for a second, because I want to bring up something that you just made me think about. Somebody that I was not a fan of. I wasn't not a fan of per se, but I didn't appreciate him as much during his career was Kobe Bryant. And
you and me both.
Since he passed, I've gone down a very deep dive into a lot of what he did, why he did it, how he did it. But the one thing I would absolutely love is to have a conversation with Kobe today if he was alive, because I believe if Kobe knew what he knew now, back in his late 20s, early 30s, I think he would have worked out a lot differently, because in his book, The Mamba Mentality, and in a bunch of his videos and interviews, he talked about if practice was in the morning from 8 to 10, he would get to the facility and he would work out from 6 to 7:30 and take a nap. And then he would go to practice and then he would take a nap or he would lift after. And he made so many different quotes, very popular and famous, but he always spoke about, if Tyler's competing against me, for example, and I'm Kobe, and I'm training 6 hours every day and Tyler's training 2 hours every day, he's never going to catch me. And I remember at the time I was like, wow, that's impressive. And going back to the word, like you said, taking yourself and that of down to the bone of quote unquote grinding. Everybody talks about grinding like it's a good thing, and they want to say, oh well, Tyler grinds it out. In some ways, it's a good thing, but when you look at the definition of grinding, something bone on bone, when you need to get your hip replaced, which my father's had both of his, he didn't walk into the doctor and say, hey, congratulations, Ken. Like, you've now successfully ground down both of your hips, so now we need new ones. He went in there, was hobbling, and the doctor was like, yeah, you've done way too much running and basketball and working out. We need to get you a new hip. And I think the conversation with Kobe would be really powerful. I don't know if I could ever record it because he might not want me to put it out there, but I'd just love to have a conversation with him and say, knowing what you know now and knowing how of these little injuries you got over the last 6 years of your career, would you have worked out a little bit differently? And again, not speaking for him, but I think he would have. He never would have taken a full day or 2 days or 3 days off, but he would have, I believe, recovered more, recovered better. But going back to your pie, I think it's a mix. I'm not gonna try to fluff an answer, but I think there's the physical side. I think there's the mental side. I think there's also the spiritual or faith side or energy or karma, whatever individually somebody believes in. But then I think a big component of that is the recharge, the rest, recovery. And I think in today's day and age, especially with social media, where everybody only looks like they post their highlight reel, is I'm working out, every day, like never stop. I don't work. Like all I do is like work out. And to me, I want to know what happens behind the scenes, right? So when that person had a really tough game, how did they recover, right? When that person lost a business deal, did they call up their performance coach? Did they go to their physio for sports? Did they go to, a psychiatrist or therapist and just kind of work through some of those things? Because I think in today's day and age, the most successful people are the ones that kind of take all those parts of the pie and are able and willing to almost take a bite out of the one that's needed, as opposed to always going down and saying, I just grind, I never stop, everything's perfect. Because for me, I don't knock anybody on social media, but I want to see those people that are struggling. How did you come back from it? Like when you had that worst season in your life, what got you to the next point? And to me, success leaves clues, but I think we all look at people's successes, but failures are our greatest teachers if we allow them to be.
On that last point, it's when we look at our failures and see them as lessons that we're able to learn for. There's a quote on my phone from Nelson Mandela. And it's essentially I never lose. I either win or I learn. And it comes back, John Maxwell, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. This idea, am I willing to learn forward? And I want to go back to Kobe because I want to talk about this sacrifice. And, so many people, now after the fact, after his passing, they look at the Mamba mentality and just like applaud it and like just grind, 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 grind. You can't be successful unless you do that. And I've seen a little bit of his post-career work, right? When he was moving into wanting to be a keynote speaker, he wanted to do more of, doing that stuff and listening to some of those things. And I think he was realizing as a dad, oh, snap. I think he was really changing his persona because he wanted to be on stages. He wanted to do it. And they're like, dude, you're all about yourself. That's what you've shown for years. Like you'll work with people, but Alan Stein Jr., friend, he talks about Kobe being in the gym, dripping sweat when they're going to meet at 4 a.m. for a workout then, because he's already been there. And one of the things that I've seen and learned is that can only get you so far because eventually you're going to have to pay the price. It's paying the price in relationships. It's paying the price in your body. It's paying the price of I did not do enough of the mental that had nothing to do with physical, right? The people that spent time to do the mental exercises. I remember I'm just thinking of the Rose Bowl. Disgust me that I have to talk about this school. The person's probably a great guy, but JJ McCarthy being at the field barefoot, sitting against the pylon of the field goal and just visualizing, doing all the mental work. And somebody could laugh at him. It's like, oh, that's so soft. Why aren't you out throwing the ball? Why aren't you out doing things like, but that mental work is far going to exceed whatever physical. If I'm spent physically, my mental will never catch up. And that sacrifice that I think we're seeing a lot of professional athletes and, professional people like in the spotlight sharing. But to your point, it's no different than somebody that's listening here that is a regional manager, who's a sales manager, who is, what are you doing when you get your teeth kicked in? Are you taking it out on the people you work with? Are you taking it out on your family? You're taking a moment to say, hey, who am I? What am I great at? What can I do to serve people? What grounds me? It's why I have cows. It is honestly why I have cows. Because when life gets crazy and busy, I can go there. They have no idea. They don't say words and they're appreciative. I take care of them. And it brings me closer to, one, my past growing up on a farm, but it's also something that I realize, hey, I can learn so much through this if I take the time to just mentally think through it. And I just wonder, how do you, do those things yourself? Or how do you coach people to do those mental aspects, as you mentioned, that bring back to the legacy, that bring back to the positivity, that bring back to the no quit?
I love that you gave that example, and I can see that picture of JJ because it was all over social media. And I have a couple individual coaches that I work with. One of them is a gentleman by the name of Brian Kane, who I'm biased in some ways, but I think he's the absolute best when it comes to mental performance and coaching. And he talks about those things all the time. And there's the famous quote, your body gives up before the mind does. And working with athletes and people in sales and entrepreneur world, people always think that, oh, you just go, go, go all the time. And it's impossible to go all the time. It's impossible not to take a break and take a rest. I don't ever tell anybody as far as, what they need to when it comes to sleep. I'm not an expert in that field, but I would never tell anybody that, you could get by and be insanely successful off of an hour of sleep. But on the flip side is I would never say that everybody needs 8 hours and 26 minutes because I think we're all different. But it's impossible to go 24, 48, 72 hours and not take a break. And when it comes to the example you give about JJ, he trained himself physically to be in that place. His team would not have been there if it wasn't for him. I know somebody that played with him that's from this area, went to my high school, that has some really good stories about just his work ethic, but he took it to the next level. He went to that space where he said, I'm going to visualize. I'm also going to, whether you call it meditating, whether you call it breath work, whether you call it, slowing down, being where your feet are. So many people call it different things. And to me, it's irrelevant what you call it, as long as you do it what works for you. And what I love about what JJ has done is JJ has experimented. And I wish we could, again, phone him on this Who Wants to Be a Millionaire to get his 2 cents, because I know for a fact no coach at any point said, okay, JJ, it's 3 minutes and 26 seconds and you do exactly this and say this and just go. And he took it blindly and said, this is what I do. Now, I'm sure people introduced him to it, but I would say I had to bet all my money that he tried different things, whether it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Maybe he tried it in the locker room. Maybe it was too loud. Maybe he wanted to go out in the field. You can see he's got headphones on, whether they are, unbeknownst to me or you, they could have been noise canceling headphones, or it could have been his own recording. Dr. Nate Zinzer, who's a well-known author, I was very fortunate to have him on my podcast. He creates these audio recordings for his athletes and for his clients, and it's unbelievably successful because it's what works for that person. So JJ spends the time on the field, excuse me. He spends the time clearly watching film. He spends the time in the weight room. He spends the time in the classroom, but he also spends that time recharging himself, whether that's meditation, journaling, breath work, whatever it is. But he's taken it to that next level. And I'm not going to in any way say he wouldn't be successful without it, but I would confidently say that he would not be as successful as he is today if he hadn't invested in himself, in the full himself as he has.
Does that tie back to accountability and self-leadership?
Oh, I believe 100%, going back to accountability, self-leadership, but also accountability to his team. So because he put himself in the best position individually, his brain, his mind, slowing down, visualization in the weight room, whether he's seeing the trainer in the film room, that's all to be the best version of himself as a quarterback, as a leader. But then simultaneously, he has now put himself in position to be the best quarterback and leader of the offense for his team. And going back to Kobe, you were spot on. A lot of people said that Kobe was very selfish in many ways. Obviously, I never played with him, but just of what I've read and heard, teammates said that, he was, or he did have that selfish side to him. But they also said the same thing about Michael Jordan early on in his career. Against the Celtics, he scored 63 points in the playoffs. He had a bunch of 40 and 50-point games. He got swept by the Detroit Pistons. Then he started realizing that, yes, I may be the superstar of this team, but it's of this team. It's not superstar me. I am the superstar of the Chicago Bulls. Kobe Bryant was the best player on the Los Angeles Lakers, but he never won or lost a championship by himself. He always won it and lost it with others. But are you willing to put yourself in that position to say, I'm going to be the best version of myself selfishly, so I can be the best version of myself for my family, for my team, for my company. To go back to one thing, total change of direction. I don't often talk about this, but you kind of led me down in a good way. I went through a very difficult and painful divorce a couple years ago, and initially I was upset, I was mad. You go through all those things. I definitely pointed some fingers. The woe is me, but I got to a point, and it wasn't easy, and it wasn't early on, and it definitely uh, it's it sounds easy to say it now, but it was definitely a lot harder to go through it. But I got to the point where I was able to say that my divorce happened for me, and I can honestly say in 2024, I'm a million times better version of myself. Um, I think my ex and I are good co-parents. I'm not going to speak for her, but I think we would both agree that we were not good as a marriage collective unit. I think she probably has some different opinions as I have some different opinions, but what transpired over those last 3, 4, 5 years for me was a ton of internal and external work, a ton of internal and external growth, where I used to look at my divorce that I was a failure myself, looking in that self accountability mirror. Now I'm able to look at and fully own that I failed in that marriage. That marriage didn't last all the way through, but because I'm willing to learn, and I'm still learning and still going through a bunch of it, I now have come out a much better, I believe, version of myself. I think I'm a better parent, I'm a better father. And I think if I get married again down the road, I know for a fact I've taken the good, the bad, the neutral to allow it to let me be a much better version of myself. But before I took accountability, when I was pointing fingers and say this happened to me and woe is me, there wasn't that self accountability, and now I own it, and I'm 100% accountable for the things that I didn't do well, the things that I wish I did differently. But now I'm looking forward as if and when these type of things happen, I think I'm so much better equipped to better handle them moving forward, knowing that I'm not going to be perfect. There are going to be things that I going to do and hit my head and say, should have done that differently. But I'm super accountable now because I went through a really difficult time. And the only reason I think I'm at the place I am now is because now I have 100% accountability for what I did and what I didn't do during that marriage.
What brought that accountability?
Um, I think the realization that, and it sounds a little bit cliche, but nobody was going to get me through it. People could help. I had some good friends. I have two amazing parents, but with all that said, none of them were ever going to do it or anything for me. They were going to help. They were going to give advice, but I really realized that the only way I'm going to get through this in the best way is if I take 100% ownership, not 70, not 60, not 50, but 100% ownership. And then I also struggle with something, and maybe someone listening to this will connect, but I got to the point where I knew that my ex was never going to apologize for anything. And I realized that I didn't need her or want her to apologize at that point, because if she had, it would not have meant anything. And I was okay with that at that point because I said, I'm moving past this. And when I literally figuratively turned that page over, I just said, I'm never looking back at why didn't she do this or say this. I said, it was what it was. We've finished that chapter of the book. Now I'm moving forward. And maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I'll reread, that chapter just to see, what it says. But I had to fully embrace the fact that the only person that's going to truly get me through this is myself. But pardon my French, but it sucked going through it. And there's not an ounce of me that would want to go back right to the middle of that storm and face it again. But got to be completely honest with you, Tyler. I am so grateful that I went through it because I would not be who I am or where I am now if I didn't.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I want to continue because I know people listening in are going through situations. I've gone through situations, and you think about this accountability and this self-leadership. if you look back, the points that you were fighting that growth and evolution, and maybe tie this into Kobe, it's like, man, I don't know how else to play but to go out and score 81 and, take every shot and come to the gym at 4 a.m. I don't know how to be a leader in an organization without being micromanaging and directive and, super controlling. How did you change your mindset to convert? It's like, to come back to, I have to take ownership. It's like, I have to do this work.
That's a great question, and I've been asked a bunch, during and after the divorce. But the interesting component of kind of where it started off was I played 2 sports in college. I coached college basketball for a bunch of years, and I had gotten out of shape. Not I wasn't obese or not going to the gym or anything, but I had gotten out of shape, and the excuse of like whether it was having ice cream or eating late at night or something, I just made a decision and I said I need to get in better shape for me so I can be a better version of myself for my kids. And it was the one thing that I had at that moment 100% control over. So there were times when, if I called, my kids were very young at the time, they didn't have phones and things. So I was, in essence, sometimes calling the house or my ex. And if she didn't pick up or call back, I couldn't control. Obviously, I wasn't going to drive over during a pretty tough divorce and, start banging on the door. So there were those times when, I didn't talk to the kids one night or didn't see them and scheduling. And one thing I had 100% control over was my workouts in the morning and getting in better shape. So I committed to that for myself first and foremost, but ultimately for my kids and our future as well. And that was the one thing at the time. My dad and I talk about this a lot. Was I lost a bunch of weight, I got in much better shape, but it made me feel better, and not from the perspective of superficial looking in the mirror, but that self confidence. And I realized that if you work hard and put in the time, especially on those days when you didn't want to, especially on those days when I didn't feel like it, and then that overlapped into other areas of my life with the podcast, with speaking, with coaching, with trying to serve others, with our Positivity Tribe company. We've written a couple books. I just finished the kids book, which is being edited, and we're working with an illustrator. But part of the whole component of the Positivity Tribe as a company is we have these positivity notes that I started leaving under the windshield wipers of cars. And I don't know exactly why I started doing it, but just motivational quotes. And then people reached out to me and said, hey, can you send me some? How do I get them? How do I purchase them? And we've never made them available for purchase. They're all for free. But then it was realizing that when you do for others, it makes you feel good. And the challenge during the divorce for my kids, my oldest son and I, we still have some struggles from that period. And I think when he gets older, my hope is that he's going to be able to look back and say, even though I was mad at dad or I was frustrated, maybe he felt in some ways that, I left per se. I don't want him or my other kids to ever say dad wasn't there for us. And going back to the controlling piece was when I was in better shape, when I was feeling better, I was able to do things with more confidence. And it just goes back to the idea of controlling the controllables to me, which is a pure parallel to accountability. Because in life, especially during this pandemic and after the pandemic, I think people better realize that there are many things we have 100% control over. There are some things we have some control over, but there are a ton of things that we have absolutely zero control over. And the one thing in all those overlapping that is true, we do have control over is our attitude, our effort, and the way in which we do something. And I always wanted to show my kids that even though I don't see them all the time, even though I'm not with them all the time, I'm always asking them about their day. I'm always asking about their school, their sports, their activities. And 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, when they're adults and realizing that, maybe they were, not understanding the full picture, that I was always there. I always had a great attitude. and I would do anything for them. But it came back really down to just the fact that I had to own all of my accountability, not most of it. It was all of it, and it was ugly. It was brutal to get through, and I definitely would never go back to the beginning of it.
I think there's an element as you share that probably the legacy for your kids, for your family, is through the midst of all that you didn't quit.
Yeah. And that hearing that from you, I really appreciate that. But that's kind of interesting how it all came about, because it was right in the beginning of when we started the process of the divorce, when I launched the company. Podcast was super new, and I jokingly I said with people that I think in some way God said to me, "Hey, I know this is the most inopportune time, but I'm going to put this company, No Quit Living, this podcast, your speaking coaching, right during the just heat of that battle, and I'm going to see if you can make it through it." And maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but there was no good time for it. But I also think that it was a really good distraction, because even during those difficult, really tough days where I wanted to throw in the towel, where I wanted to probably, go over and call my ex-wife some names that I would have regretted or done something, I had this company, this venture that I could pour into, and it was a really good distraction during a really bad time.
There's an element there where I would contend that process of leading yourself and being accountable, you ultimately have seen is serving and leading others. And my belief, as I've had to go through tumultuous journeys as well, is the better that I lead myself, I put myself to better lead others. I think if we were to go back and have the conversation with Kobe, I believe Kobe became a better leader as a dad. And had he focused on that, he would have been a better leader on the team, because of what he did say that he did evolve and understand as a dad, that he had to grow to. And right, it was really that growth into it. And I believe your growth in that period of self is leading to others, and that's how you're able to serve.
I agree, and that would be a really interesting conversation that I would love to have with Kobe, because I think the old Kobe, right when he was in his last year or two, I don't think he would ever admit that. He'd say, I'm the best player, so I should shoot, and if the team's going to win or lose, like, I'm going to do everything. And in some ways, that's true. He probably has deserved, and it's better for him to take a game-winning potential shot than maybe a rookie who's never done that. But I think, again, going back to the conversation, is if he could look back at some of those things, I think he would have liked to have been a better leader. Going back to Jordan for a second too, it's interesting, just because I'm a huge Jordan fan. Jordan's not in the media. People don't realize that he's not quoted as saying ever, "I'm the GOAT, I'm the greatest, it's me and everybody else." He's talked about a lot that he looked up to Bird, Magic, Julius Irving, David Thompson. He wanted to be Russell. He wanted to be the best basketball player he could be. But Jordan's not in the media a lot. There's not. So Patrick Bet David had a fantastic 90-plus minute interview just one-on-one with Kobe. Jordan really hasn't done much of anything since he left the NBA. Now, he's done some interviews when he was the owner of the Charlotte Hornets, and he's done some interviews with his charity work. He's done a few things with some of the cigar organizations, but Jordan has not sat down and had those deep conversations that Kobe did the last 2 or 3 years with his life. And I don't know, candidly, unfortunately, if we're ever going to get that from Jordan. But I do think that seeing his reaction during the last dance, when some of the comments of his teammates not upset him to the point where he wanted to fight, but you could tell, he had, I don't want to say some regret, but I think in some ways he wished he had been a little bit better of a leader. And I don't know if the word is grace. I don't know if the word is, realizing that everybody can't play and work as hard as he could. But the one thing that Jordan really hit me was him and Steve Kerr had a fight after or during practice, and Jordan punched Steve Kerr in the face. Supposedly that he kind of meant whatever, but he punched him, and Steve didn't back down, and Jordan called Steve an hour or two later. He wasn't told to. He wasn't, there wasn't an ultimatum that if he didn't do that, he'd be suspended. He did it on his own. But Steve Kerr is famous for saying that Jordan had a different level of respect for him because Steve Kerr stood up for himself. And they had a great rest of their career. And if you look at the last two championships post that fight, Jordan relied on Kerr a lot for some big time shots because he knew, and obviously it's not just because of the fight, but he knew that not only was Steve Kerr a tough guy, but he knew that when the game was on the line, Steve would be ready to shoot the shot, and that's what I love about Jordan and some of those commercials. He never says, "I make every shot when the game's on the line. There's no doubt in my mind." It's when the game's on the line, I want to take the shot. And Steve Kerr, in many times in the last few years, when the game was on the line, Jordan relied on him because he was double teamed. And it goes back to, being a good leader, but also being a good teammate. And I think the Jordan of the first year or two, when he was losing, he never would have made those passes to Steve Kerr. But later on in the career, he did because he realized that's what it took to win.
I think the word that you were searching for a moment ago, whether it's grace, I think it's empathy.
Yeah.
And I think it's being willing to walk with others. And that to me has been the major change in my leadership. And I think whether it's yourself having empathy for yourself, for your ex-wife, for those around you, we talk about Jordan and Kerr, we talk about that. And to me, that is the great evolution of our strength and ability to serve others, is how much that we can rely on healthy empathy.
Let me ask you a question. I'm curious to get your perspective. And for those that are listening to this, Tyler and I are going to do a home and home. So when we're finished recording here, we're going to flip the mic around. But do you think, from your experience, do you think when it comes to empathy and grace that everybody deserves it from day one? Or do you think that it takes time in some ways to establish or develop a relationship? And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about a best friend relationship. If it's a work experience, it could be a working relationship or a working respect. But how do you feel when it comes to empathy and grace? Is it something that comes automatically, or do you feel that it's something you have to grow into or build with some people?
So let me pose this back in a form of question so I can be the podcast host this time. Do you believe that people deserve a relationship, a connection with you?
Me in general?
Yeah. So in that context, as you're asking me, do you think people deserve empathy? I'm asking you, do you believe people deserve a relationship, or in that relationship that there's a connection?
I wish we could replay this. We'll just go back and ask questions. Let me pose you a question. So I don't think everybody deserves a relationship from day one. I believe everybody, regardless of anything, deserves respect from day one.
Okay.
And the reason I say don't deserve, and it maybe deserves a strong word, relationship, because relationship's a two-way street. So for example, if you and I start working together, but you have zero interest in any relationship other than strictly work, maybe that might bother me because I'm like, well, why doesn't Tyler like me? And we're going to be working together. But regardless of that, from day one, I'm going to offer you respect first and foremost until you show me that you don't deserve any of it, or you're just like, look, don't ever talk to me, don't do anything. I'd be like, okay. But I think it goes back to coaching, whether it's sports or a business or company. People assume that there's a relationship, and people assume that there's a friendship right away, and it takes time to build that. But I think respect should always be given, and also expected or anticipated when you're part of a team, company, organization. Now the next step is friendship, relationship, how close you are or not. But I think respect is the foundation first and foremost. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, and I've seen it with some of the companies and teams, where it's like, well, you have to earn my respect first. And I think that's a really tough place to start. And I always caution people that if you respect somebody or offer respect, it doesn't mean that you put them before you, or you let them walk all over you, or if you're on a sports team, you say, you know what, Tyler, like you be the captain, like I'll give you we're like you do everything. But it's if you have to earn your respect from me first, second, third, fourth, fifth, it's really hard to develop a strong culture because it's just an uphill battle the whole time. I feel if you have that respect, and it goes both ways. So if you respect me, but I have zero respect for you, there's no shot that we're going to have any type of relationship. But if we both start that job at a company, we say, look, we're going to be working together. Let's respect each other, and then we'll see what happens down the road when it comes to a friendship, either personally or professionally. But I think no matter what, you have to have that foundation of respect first.
So there's a person I listen to a lot. Craig Groeschel's his name, and pastor, and he has a great little kind of I don't want to say dissertation, but he breaks this down a little bit, and he talks about honor and respect. He said we're commanded to honor people, and people can earn or disearn respect. And it's something that I adhere to, and kind of not differing, but understanding or maybe taking it different. Everyone deserves honor. Absolutely. But yet then respect in that relationship, and however that relationship evolves and what that relationship means. I would contend back and say, from the empathy question, if we're in a relationship, however that is, and a relationship demands connection, it's my responsibility as when we first met each other to build a connection with you if it's going to go somewhere. And just like, and I'll share it for our audience, Chris had some technical difficulties on his end, right? I've been there. And what did I say to you? It's okay. I've been there. That was me practicing empathy. Did we have a big, long relationship? No. But that is me saying, hey, I get it. I understand. We're in this relationship. We can go together because of the honor, because of the respect of being in this format. It's something you grow into and you understand through relationship. And it comes back to a little bit the accountability. How do I want to be held accountable for how I show up and how I treat people? Because I want people to walk away, whether they're listening, they're watching, or they're sitting across the camera from me saying, man, that guy's authentic, he's vulnerable, and he truly cares. If I've accomplished that, then I have done what I can do to show people what really matters to me. And if that's the case, then I believe eventually, somehow, some way, that will lead to influence. My desire to influence is to help people not go through the shitty experiences I've gone through, because I didn't have that understanding of empathy and relationships and what that was all about. And I had to pay the awful price for years. And that's my evolution, and that's my change. And so it comes back to, where does that empathy, settle in? That's the solution to my insecurity. My insecurity that I don't have value. Well, how do I have value? I be empathetic. I connect with people. I show them, you know what? I'm going to add value to you by showing you how much value you have to me. And that's what matters.
Listening to you say that, something just hit me. And I think it's really interesting as part of our conversation has gone today. But I made a decision a while ago that I wanted to meet a lot of people, do a lot of networking, both in person, virtual. And I don't think anybody would say, I don't care if anybody likes me. I don't care if I have one follower or 1,000. I don't think there's a lot of people out there. Maybe David Goggins is probably the only one who says, I could care less about that. But people want to be liked more than they don't want to be liked, right? People want to have likes and comments on their posts and podcasts and YouTube channels more than they want to have crickets. But I made a decision, especially when it comes to accountability, is Tyler might make a decision an hour from now, 2 weeks from now, a month from now, that he genuinely doesn't really like me. And we're maybe not going to hang out outside of whatever venue we're in. But I never wanted you or anybody else to say, Chris is not authentic. He's not accountable. He doesn't do what he says he's going to do. But liking me or not is a choice and a decision that you make. I can influence, obviously, in some way, shape, or form. But at the end of the day, if you and I are scheduled to do a project or do something, and not only am I there, but I'm early and I'm on time, and if I had to do A or B and I get them done, I 100% control that. you can never say to somebody in that situation, unless you're lying, saying, oh, Chris didn't show up and he was supposed to do these two things and he didn't. But during our interaction, if you decide that you don't like me and you don't think I'm authentic or I'm not accountable, that's a choice that you make. And even though it might bother me, if I know that I did what I said I was going to do, when I said I was going to do it, and if I told you I was going to introduce you to somebody or make an email introduction and I did it, I can put my head down on the pillow at night and say, I'm confident and comfortable with my effort and I did what I said I was going to do. Tyler might not like me and that might not make me happy and I'm not going to, jump for joy, but I'm not going to regret in saying, well, maybe if I actually did what I said I was going to do and maybe if I didn't send that email 3 weeks after when I said I was going to do it. And it's really hard to own that, but it goes back to just the accountability side of doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And if for some reason you are not able to fulfill that commitment, you own it 100% with zero expectations. And when you're able to do that, you can't control the back end. People are still not going to like you. People still might not follow your stuff on social media or like it or share it. But at the end of the day, you can sleep better at night knowing that you gave your best effort and you did what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it.
Absolutely. It comes down to what are your values? And if that's one of your values, then hold on to it. Chris, as we wrap up our time here, I want to, thank you for your time. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
I appreciate that. So the best thing is our website, noquitliving.com or thepositivitytribe.com. And then I'm most active on Instagram, just no quit living. And I really love connecting with people. But did want to say one thing that I've been working on with some of my coaches. But the idea of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with when Bruce Lee has his chief aim. It's like some people call it their mission statement. Some people call it their purpose, their why. But for me, my mission and purpose is to inspire people and provide them with the tools so they can be, do, achieve, and here's the key word, attempt more in their lives. Because I really and truly believe that everybody has a little bit more. And the reason I say be, do, achieve, and attempt more is because life is all about going after all of your dreams and goals. Even if you fall short. I was working with a school last week and a bunch of sophomores, and I said, I don't want anybody in this room 5, 10, 20 years from now to look back and say, I could have, I should have, I always wanted to do that. I always talked about doing this, but I never did it. Even if you fall short of that huge goal or dream, but you tried it, you're never going to look back and say, man, I wish I did that. So I hope something I said today inspired somebody, but I always provide also my personal email address, which is chris@noquitliving.com. I love to connect with people. I love to meet new people, but I just want to, before we jump off here, say to you, Tyler, that I've been on well above 200 podcasts myself. There are so many people that do a good job. There are so many people that do some homework. But you were awesome. I love how you turned it back around on me. And I just wanted to say to some of my listeners or people that follow me that are watching this or listening to this now, make sure you follow Tyler. Make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel, subscribe to his podcast. But I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity. As you know, being on the other side of the mic most of the time, it's really fun when you get to have the, I guess, spotlight on you as opposed to on the other person. But it was a really fun interview, and I definitely didn't think that we were going to get into some of the divorce stuff. But I'm glad we did, because I hope that somebody listening to this at some point will be able to say, hey, that's the reason why I'm going to keep going and be more accountable today than I was yesterday.
Well, again, thank you for that. Thank you for that vulnerability. Thank you for your time. And to thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. Remember to subscribe on YouTube, like Chris just mentioned, and wherever you listen to podcasts. By rating and reviewing each episode, you can help more people discover impactful leaders like Chris. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.